Yesterday's Advent hymn was one by Charles Wesley that was on the theme of the bridegroom returning and the importance of believers in the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 wise, 5 foolish, being ready, watching, and prepared for him to return. And this is supposed to be one of the ongoing themes, one of the central themes of the Advent period, where the church reminds herself of how important it is to be watchful, wakeful, not to fall asleep, seduced by all the pleasures or cares of the world around us, but alert to the fact that Christ will come again. And today's hymn is a hymn on that similar theme, calling on sleepers to awake and watch, for at last he's coming. And this, for the church and for believers, should be a tremendous cause of joy in our lives and expectation. And that's captured in this beautiful hymn as we anticipate the coming of the bridegroom and going with him to the marriage supper of the Lamb, not as guests or as servants, but as his bride. And during the Advent period, the church is supposed to not just be preparing for celebration of the first coming of Christ, but reminding ourselves that we've got to look higher even than that, to his return, and be praying for that return. And what I find interesting about this hymn by a German hymn writer, Philip Nicolai, was as a Lutheran pastor, he wrote this hymn during a time when the plague, as happened frequently in the 16th century when he lived, was afflicting the city he lived in. And people didn't know from one day to another if they were about to catch that fatal illness. And of course, the chances of having a vaccine or even intensive care units or whatever was something they couldn't even have imagined in their day. And yet in the midst of that, he wrote this wonderful hymn, because afflictions, difficulties, disasters, death, disease in this life are intended to lift our eyes not to the human hope of a sort of new normal, but lift them even higher than that, to the return of our King, and pointing to his coming again, when death, disease, and all disaster will finally be removed. And I can't think of anything more appropriate at the minute, when people are seemingly so focused on somehow life getting back to normal and overall the disruption. The church, in her faithful witness and prophetic witness, should be pointing upwards during the Advent season to the return of the Lord Jesus, which is the only hope to deal finally with death, disease, and so on, and will bring in the only new normal, but he will bring it in eternally. And that believers, even in the midst of whatever disasters the world may be experiencing, may still find joy. As Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always, because we are waiting and watching for our bridegroom to come, as he surely will, for his bride. I wrote this tune almost 50 years ago, and I don't know if it's ever been sung in public or not, but it's the first time certainly it's been recorded. Sleepers wake, for night is flying. The watchmen on the heights are crying, awake Jerusalem at last. Midnight hears the welcome voices, and that the thrilling cry rejoices. Come forth, you virgins, night is past. glorious, so strong in grace, in truth victorious. Her star is risen, her light is